Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dissenter Weekly for July 23rd, 2020. I'm Kevin Gosztola, Managing Editor for Shadowproof.com. We have several stories to cover, and we just launched a newsletter in the past couple of weeks that is a companion to the show, which I encourage you to go subscribe to. We'll talk about more of that at the end of this week's edition. But first, I want to remind you to not forget to hit the red subscribe button below this video to follow our show. And remember that Shadowproof is a 100% reader-funded and supported website. Our ability to do this show depends on your financial support. If you want to help us sustain this show and grow as an organization, please check out our donation and membership options over at shadowproof.com/donate. And as I mentioned, the newsletter over at dissenter.substack.com could be another way in order to support this show. So I'm flying a bit solo this week. Brian has a work thing to take care of at this hour. And so let's start moving through our stories that we have for this week. The first major thing was something that I spent some time on over at the newsletter that we started, and also on Twitter and interacting with Reality Winner's family, seeing what they're going through. There are now 510 or 514 women at Federal Medical Center Carswell who have tested positive for COVID-19. That is an incredible, absolutely astronomical spike in numbers. It was around 200, 210 before the last week. And now we have numbers up in the range of 500 and 510. And so something is going on. Either the Bureau of Prisons was not transparent about the numbers of people who had the virus, or the tests were slow. The results were not coming in. And so now we have these women. There are about 250 of them who we know are quarantined in one unit. It would appear that they ran out of space in isolation units. There's my cat. Hello. This is Bogart, and he's joining me for this show while I try to give a serious update about Reality Winner. So Reality Winner has tested positive for COVID-19, and we knew that she had received a test. It seems like a lot of people who came into contact with others in the prison were receiving tests. Her bunkmate had tested positive for COVID-19, moved out, and did have symptoms and was sick. So far, what we know is that Reality Winner is not showing signs or symptoms. As of July 23rd, was not showing signs of any kind of impact from contracting the virus. And so that's good. We're glad that she is not feeling sick yet, but she's faced retaliation. I did some media coverage of her. It got back to staff at the prison, and she herself communicated to her sister and her mother that she was receiving some retaliation. In fact, one of the correctional officers at the facility went out of her way to come to her her living quarters where she is and say, "I just want to congratulate you on your positive test results." I'll repeat that again. "I just want to congratulate you on your positive test results," which is obscene and very mean, but speaks to the insensitivity that a lot of staff seem to have at these facilities towards people who are trapped, essentially. Instead of decarcerating and removing people from these facilities in order to increase the safety, we have had a constant situation throughout this pandemic where people are unable to social distance and do what they need to do to protect from getting the virus. There's also the fact that Reality Winner apparently told her sister Brittany that they are not allowing her to clean or did not allow her to report for paid prison detail. And so when it came time for her to do her job, they actually tried to send somebody else who was a diabetic prisoner, someone who could barely walk, someone who is not doing well as far as their physical condition. And it was all just punishment. The staff is trying to assert their authority over reality, and they know that she gets some kind of sense of well-being, a sense that she can do something about whether or not she gets infected by the virus or not by cleaning, by disinfecting. And they're denying her cleaning supplies. They're denying her the ability to control her space in order to make her seem like she has to submit to them. And that is what you can expect in these facilities. She is still pursuing a compassionate release request. So it's important to consider that the 11th Circuit has had this appeal before them for over 2 months now. And as of this moment, they have yet to rule. It has become even more urgent than it was a week or two ago. And in fact, it would appear that not only does reality have a case for compassionate release, but so do the hundreds of women who are in this facility. Many of them, I presume, probably have relatively short sentences similar to the ones that Rick has. And these are people who were incarcerated in Carswell because they had medical conditions. And so they were sent to this facility in order to receive some attention. And that's why they're there. And so to the extent that they need some support right now, it really should be the case that judges are approving releases, that people like reality can go back home and if they need to finish their sentence or they're remain confined at home, they can do that. And so unfortunately, though, the 11th Circuit has been dragging and has not done anything to help Reality Winner at this point. So we continue to this next story that I have to share with you, which involves the Pentagon. Here's a story that we recently posted that I put together for, again, the newsletter that is covering whistleblower stories. It's also up at shadowproof.com, just highlighting and bringing attention to the fact that the Pentagon informed the House Armed Services Committee in the past couple of weeks that there was a massive or aggressive leak investigation into what the Pentagon chief calls bad leaks that took place in last fall. It's unclear what he's particularly referring to, but I suppose bad leaks would be ones that had given the public relations team at the Pentagon a bad day, where they actually had to answer for their actions or thought it was a nuisance because they believed that lies were being spread about their agency. So, boo-hoo. But he told personnel that they needed to focus on operational security, and leaks continued. And so apparently he initiated an investigation into these leaks, whether it was for classified information or even unclassified information, and also to crack down on unauthorized discussions with the media. And in his statement here, I'll just give you an example of what he said to condemn the leaks. Those of you who have followed some of these stories in the past 10 years, like I have, might recall the kinds of words we hear from officials who get angry. And he manages to cram just about every kind of thing you could say against leaks into this one statement. He said, quote, "All those things, again, hurt our nation's security. They undermine our troops, their safety. They affect our relations with our countries. They undermine our national policy. It's bad, and it's happening all over the government, executive branch, legislative branch, to some degree." And he gives no specifics. He doesn't really say what he's talking about. And there's no examples of anyone being impacted as far as troop movements would go. And what I outline in this piece, and what I would like to just point out today, especially if you haven't heard that this was an investigation that was launched, is that there's this major insider threat program in the Pentagon and in all intelligence agencies with the Office of the Director for National Intelligence involved in overseeing. That's, if you remember Lying James Clapper, he was the ODNI and the leader of this conglomerate that oversees the intelligence apparatus or the security state, so to speak. And it consults and works with the Pentagon. And then there's insider threat programs at the FBI and NSA and throughout the different parts of the federal government. And they all are probably functioning fairly similarly. But at the Pentagon, in particular, which is what I focused on here, is this dynamic of having senior officials that are authorized to speak and leak and talk to the press and able to get away with leaking because they're never going to get in trouble. People like Leon Panetta, who was the defense secretary, who revealed details that were classified about the operation that targeted the kill or capture mission that was launched against Osama bin Laden with SEAL Team 6. You also have James Mattis, who's been able to leak information about the Afghanistan war with no impact to himself whatsoever. David Petraeus is another example, although when he did his thing, got in trouble, he was with the CIA and no longer with the Pentagon. But these people are able to say what they want, benefit personally. And then meanwhile, you have an insider threat program that creates a climate of fear, spreads McCarthyism, encourages everyone around you to inform on you, become snitches, and to err on the side of caution. If you have any doubts, but you have reservations about an individual, well, go to the Insider Threat Task Force and put them on their radar, and then we'll monitor them closely and keep an eye. And this all developed after Chelsea Manning's disclosures to WikiLeaks, and then it accelerated with Edward Snowden's whistleblowing on the NSA's mass surveillance programs. And I just wanted to make sure that I put something together here that showed the apparatus that has been built up in order to make it so we don't really get information from people who would like to blow the whistle. It's a system that is so controlled, that's set up in such a way that there could be whistleblowing through proper channels that we never even hear about. People who don't have faith or trust in that will go to the media, then they'll get in trouble, and they'll end up like Reality Winner, who's an example, actually. The Insider Threat Program, one of its flaws, key flaws of many, is that it does not differentiate between people who are leakers and people who are violent. They lump Aaron Alexis and Nidal Hassan, who were shooters that went on rampages at military bases. Those are people who are seen as threats in the same way that Reality Winner's treated as a threat. Chelsea Manning has been profiled, and they've come up with indicators for how to look for future Chelsea Mannings, future Edward Snowdens. They even had NSA whistleblower Thomas Drake in their files at one point and put together a character profile for what people could look for. And so I just wanted to make sure that people considered what's happening right now. I think we've seen in the past week here that there was some effort by a handful of Democrats who actually are concerned about the military-industrial complex, trying to reduce the budget by 10%. There were dozens upon dozens of Democrats, it seems, who rejected that in the Senate. You've had some moves with the massive military budget to try to put in some kind of measures for audits or encouraging whistleblowing, etc. But by and large, because there isn't much done, and also because the Pentagon is moving towards more and more secrecy daily, and against journalists trying to make it harder for people like myself to use the Freedom of Information Act to get details, you have this dynamic playing out where you are going to have leaks and where you're going to have people who are either angry, disgruntled, if that's how they want to describe them, or people who have a conscience and want to say something and speak up and then get punished for speaking out. So moving on to our next story here, we have a story here about McDonald's, and I would like to thank Michael Sanato for these next two stories. He's a journalist who has contributed multiple stories to Shadowproof in the past few years. He does excellent work, which you can find. He's on Twitter at msanat, so it's at MSAINAT1 on Twitter. So you follow him. He's constantly updating on labor, covering these kinds of workers, these worker stories. And he also is a contributor at Guardian, doing breaking some really important pieces in labor journalism. And so this press release from workers came out saying that McDonald's fired Maria Ruiz, who was an employee for 16 years, because she organized co-workers to join the strike for Black Lives and has led multiple walkouts during the pandemic. Ruiz is part of SEIU. She challenged the lack of soap and gloves at the location where she works, the franchise location in San Jose, California. This is according to a charge that was filed with the National Labor Relations Board. They allegedly did not enforce social distancing at this location, which is something she was terribly upset about. Ruiz says she was fired when raising concerns with management. And, quote, according to the charge, it says, quote, McDonald's asserted a pretextual reason for discharging Ms. Ruiz, but in reality fired her for her advocacy for worker safety and her organizing for better working conditions and union representation. Now, the filing even goes on to document what they claim is evidence that McDonald's managers had a blacklist of union supporters whom they called mitoteros, which translates to gossipers, or troublemakers. And get out of the way. Okay. And who management intends to fire. And so there's this blacklist, and they believe that Maria was likely on it, and that there are other people like Maria who they want to go after. So Bogart has joined us again for part of this show. And the filing with the NLRB further shows other evidence of retaliation. And Law 360 did some coverage of this story. They pointed to an example in Oakland where a McDonald's franchise owner forced highly contagious workers who had contracted the virus to keep working, and even gave workers face masks made from dog diapers, which is very crude. And McDonald's, of course, denies all of these allegations, claiming they are not true. So we have this second story that I'd like to get to here that is about Disney reportedly retaliating against workers who wanted COVID-19 testing. Again, this comes from Michael. The Actors Equity Association, which Michael says represents 750 cast members at Disney World, alleged that its members were retaliated against after demanding Disney test the performers. They were recalled for work because Disney World is absurdly reopening. We've seen the astronomical, the incredible spikes. The cases remain very high in Florida, yet this speaks to the corporate culture that they are not going backward and are pressing on with some of these plans. So Mary McColl, who's the executive director of Actors Equity Association, this labor union, said, quote, since our public request that Disney test performers in the park, there have been more than 114,000 new coronavirus cases in Florida. And rather than agree to test performers, Disney has decided to retaliate against workers fighting for a safe workplace during this pandemic. So again, I encourage you to follow Michael's work, and you can read his articles over at The Guardian. So it's a couple of labor stories. We've done these stories in the past months here, looking closely at retaliation against people who are speaking up, asking for workplace safety, minimal safeguards to protect them from getting the virus while they are called back to work. Not all of us have the luxury of being able to work from home. I'm somebody who has had the luxury of being able to work from home and do what I need to do, but there are millions of people who work lower waged, they're underpaid, they work service jobs, they have to be there in order to get paid. In order to draw some kind of income, they have to be in these workplaces where they're vulnerable. And it seems that there's just culture of having to demand these protections because these corporations just won't give them unless you fight for them. They do not want to pay the money. They don't want to invest in workplace safety. So it takes these kinds of workers who are blowing the whistle and engaged in organizing in order for anything to be done to protect people. One last story I have here for today is just a lighter one, but it still touches upon some of the darkness. We covered Sergeant Javier Escueda on a previous show, looking at the police whistleblowing that he has done. He was put on desk duty and he is under a criminal investigation in Joliet, Illinois, after he leaked, or I would say blew the whistle, and revealed a video that showed officers murdering Eric Lurry, who's a 37-year-old black man. And this led to national attention. People were appalled, I hope, understandably shocked too, I hope, because it's a snuff video. This video shows officers pulling drugs out of a man's mouth after they pinch his nose, making it impossible for him to breathe. He would not cough up the drugs, so he's in the back of a police vehicle, and they essentially, over a minute to 2 minutes, kill him in the backseat of this car because they were more concerned about the war on drugs than they were whether he was going to survive his arrest. And so this officer, this sergeant, was shocked and released this to the media. And so as it turns out, just something light and touches upon our culture. He happens to be part of something called the 501st, which are a lot of Star Wars fans, and he dresses up as a stormtrooper. He's known at the library for doing readings with people there, and it looks like going against the grain of corporate culture that might not want to show solidarity in this instance. Lucasfilm actually stepped in, sent some autographs and action figures to him and his son while he's going through this time, and gave him a letter expressing their support for, as they said, "We are deeply saddened to learn about the tragic death of Eric Lurry and the resulting actions taken against you for uncovering the unspeakable circumstances that led to his death." So I think this is a rare example of a corporation stepping in to do something that could provide some boost of morale and to show that a whistleblower really needs to continue and maintain their convictions. And so I wanted to bring that into the show. So as we conclude, I'd like to encourage you to go over to the newsletter at Substack and subscribe. It's dissenter.substack.com, as it says on the screen. There's a lot going on right now, and something that I've done on previous shows I'll do today, which is to say, be on the lookout for those who are blowing the whistle city to city on this weekend and the future weekends, as Donald Trump is deploying federal police forces to cities like Chicago, where I'm based, Albuquerque, Kansas City, wherever else they would appear, and in Portland as well, which is where they have been. There are going to be those in lower ranks who want to speak out and share what's going on. They are going to face the hammer because they come out and speak, and we have to be there to support them. And we'll cover any individual stories if they come forward and have something to reveal about the corruption, something to reveal about the very quick march toward fascism. And some would argue we're already there, because when you're trying to deputize and bring into the fold local police departments, you're going down a very dangerous path in which the Trump administration is trying to supersede and supplant local police departments and do what they've been doing. And the very basis of what Donald Trump is trying to do is to suggest that these cities, mostly run by Democratic mayors, I think they might all be run by Democratic mayors, do not know how to police Black and brown people. And so they need to have his help, as they would put it, or they need to be shown how to do policing. And in effect, that leads to authoritarianism. That leads to the kinds of crackdowns and attacks on people's right to protest and demonstrate and assemble, and also leads to the Justice Department suggesting things like they have in the past day, that journalists really don't have a right to be out there filming and recording and monitoring and witnessing and reporting on what is happening as they carry out their operations. They actually are arguing against the First Amendment rights, it would seem, in a court right now. So that shows you how far things have gotten in the march towards fascism. And we really need, in this moment, people who will come forward and speak out. But the only way they will do that is if they know there will be support if they come forward. And that's where shows like this come in. And there'll be other media that certainly support. In fact, they may even receive mainstream support because of what is happening and how radical it is in what they're trying to do to transform cities. So I conclude. I thank you again for watching this show. I thank you for supporting Shadowproof. We have a couple news stories over at our site, freelance pieces that were funded by people who are donors and are members. These are about ways in which we see moves to get to move away from relying on police. There's a mental health initiative in California that we highlight, and how they're working on ways they can respond without calling police. And then there's also a story there about a protest encampment that is set up in, and they are trying to get housing for people who are in, I apologize, I want to tell you exactly where this is. I think it might be in North Carolina. I've worked with a lot of stories this past week, so I apologize for not having that on my, it's in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a protest encampment. It's kind of harkens back to the days of Occupy, but they've been set up as and provided a safe haven for unhoused residents. They declared it a no cop zone, and this is still there, and they're fighting for affordable housing through this protest encampment. You can go read that story at Shadowproof as well. That was funded by members and donors and good-hearted people like you that tune into this show every week. So again, thank you all for watching the Dissenter Weekly. And this will go out to people who are subscribers of the Dissenter newsletter on Friday so that we can share this. But I encourage you, if you have friends, family who don't know about this show, let them know that we're doing this. We'll break this into clips so you can share particular stories if you don't want to share the entire thing. Some of these are more important than others and worth sharing around. And then we'll be back next week on July 30th. And July 30th is Whistleblower Appreciation Day. So we'll do something special that day to honor whistleblowers. But until next week, good luck to all of you.